Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Debt Stories, real people beating debt and winning financially. Today, we meet Tanya, who lives in Akron, Ohio, with her husband and their 2.5-year-old son. Like so many of us, Tanya and her husband each grew up thinking that debt is just an unavoidable part of life. But now, after paying off nearly $31,000 in just 12 months, their attitudes and life have completely changed. It just goes to show how powerful our thoughts are shaping our reality. And Tanya has faced some difficult realities.
My husband and I were both from families that was pretty common. So we just kind of grew up thinking that was the norm. I had tons of student loan debt when I graduated college. We had credit card debt. We kept trying or thinking we were trying, I guess, to get out of debt, but we weren't really ever making any headway. And then my husband ended up becoming disabled and not able to work anymore. So of course that was a big hit financially. And then we were dealing with his student loans, my student loans. We had fertility issues, his disability, just so many emotional things that kind of got all tied up with the money. So while we thought we were trying, it was like we were never really making it as much of a focus as we should have, I think.
The stress of so many big life events was a huge distraction from their growing debts.
We had about $14,000 in credit cards, a $20,000 car loan, and a almost $9,000 home equity loan, plus our mortgage. Thankfully, our mortgage is small. It's only $47,000 when we really got focused on our debt. Pretty much everywhere you looked, we had debt for something. And we even had to borrow money from family when I was on maternity leave because my company doesn't have a great maternity package. So we were just a mess.
Add it all up, and they were looking at $190,000 of total debt, plus interest. That's quite a chunk of money. Of course, they weren't looking at it yet. Tanya and her husband were avoiding it. They knew things weren't pretty, and they felt hopeless.
We went through bankruptcy thinking that was going to be a fresh start, but of course that didn't do anything to the student loans. Then we had some fertility issues, and then the summer of 2015, we surprise, found out we were pregnant. Amazing and exciting, but we weren't ready. I mean, we were still swimming in debt. We had no savings, nothing. It kind of blindsided us.
And that's when it clicked. They needed a budget that worked.
At that point, we were trying to budget it just using a spreadsheet, and I used Quicken to track our expenses. So I always kind of felt like, I have a really good handle on things because I track everything. But we weren't actually like sticking to budgeted numbers. I would just track it after the fact and be like, we went over budget or we used the credit card again. Oh, well. And never really felt like we had a clear way to move forward.
Realizing that her spreadsheet wasn't doing the trick, Tanya went searching for a solution. She knew that in order to stay on top of their finances, the budget needed to be as accessible as possible. Life with a newborn isn't easy, and neither is convincing your husband to hop on the budgeting bandwagon.
Since my husband can't work, obviously I work full time, and so when I would get home from work, all I wanted to do was be with my baby. I didn't care about do I have receipts or is something due or whatever. And so a friend of mine said, you really need to find something that you can do from anywhere, not chained to your computer at home. And so that's what got me started searching, like, maybe if I could find something I could do on my lunch break at work or, even right at the store if I enter my receipt right then. And so that's how I came across YNAB. And honestly, it sounds corny, but it really completely changed our lives when we found it.
The difference was dramatic. Before giving every dollar a job, Tanya recalls,
there were times where we were using a credit card simply because I didn't know if our balance was accurate. I didn't know what payments were still pending, so I felt like I couldn't trust our checking balance. So we were just using credit cards. And then there were a couple times where I missed a payment for no reason other than not being on top of it. I mean, we had the money ready to pay the bill, and I just was like, oh, shoot, that was due last week. Whoops, I was like, something has to change because I'm stressed out at work. I'm emotional still from the pregnancy. Our money's a mess, and I miss my baby all the time. And I knew we had to do something if we were going to be responsible and give him the kind of life we wanted to give him.
It turns out that the kind of life they wanted for their new son involved a lot less dining out. Like so many YNABers that came before them, Tanya and her husband soon realized that food was eating their budget.
It's great to have the app on our phones because when we're out somewhere, we can easily pull it up and check our categories and say like, oh, hey, no, we don't have money left to eat out. And in the past, we always felt like we were so drowning that we thought like, what's one more meal or what's one more purchase? Because we're so far gone anyway. Like, is this really going to make a difference in the grand scheme of things? But when you see those numbers like in your face and you actually hold yourself accountable and check the numbers before you spend, like that's huge. Probably the first time I think it really clicked for my husband and I, we were at home hanging out and he said something about, let's go grab a bite to eat. And I said, have you checked YNAB? And he kind of looked at me and he's like, what do you mean? And I said, take a look at YNAB and see where you think we can pull the money from so we can go out to eat. And that was like magic. Like ever since then, he and I are so much more on the same page. We're both more involved in it. It was a lot more of a conscious choice of like, okay, if we go out to eat tonight, that means that we either have to cut back on our groceries or we have to really watch our gas closely or whatever it is. But to have that thought process and that discussion ahead of time, that was huge because it used to be like we just go spend and then quote unquote figure it out later, which usually meant, well, we're carrying more of a balance on our credit card because we can't pay it off.
When their son was born, they pivoted. Figuring it out later was a thing of the past. Suddenly, they had crystal clear priorities.
We don't want Landon growing up with parents that are stressed out all the time and, you know, too worried about money to enjoy time with him. And I don't want to be stressed out. I want to relax and have fun with my baby.
So they did the work. They followed the 4 rules and it paid off.
I don't know exactly when, but there was a point and I remember saying, wow, is this what it's like to not be stressed about money? I hadn't thought about it for like a week, you know, and it was just the money's there. When the bills come, the money's there. And our discretionary spending, like we have categories and we check the categories. And it was just like, I suddenly like stopped worrying about it.
They'd turned a corner.
We had talked, you know, with each other, oh, we really need to do better at this or do better at that. But we would still rationalize purchases to each other. And we would, oh, you know, we'll figure that out next payday. You know, there was always that like giving ourselves an out. And once Landon came along, we're like, no, there's no letting ourselves off the hook anymore because he needs us and he needs us to provide for him. So we got to get it together.
With their new habits, suddenly they had money waiting for bills instead of the other way around. That can seem like the impossible dream when you're just getting started. So how did they do it?
One of the biggest things, honestly, was our attitudes and really taking an honest look at needs versus wants and focusing on our goals. Like, I know it sounds easier said than done, but when you decide that, you know, your family is more important than getting Starbucks every day or something, like we just really started looking at ways that we felt like we were spending more than we should have been. And YNAB really brought a lot of clarity to that. A perfect example was sort of early on into our YNAB journey, our Keurig died. It just quit. And pre-YNAB, I mean, I would have been at the store on my lunch break. Like there would have been no question, like we are getting another Keurig, like non-negotiable, right? And so I kind of said to my husband, like, well, that's not really in the budget. Like, what do you think about just going back to a plain old, like, regular coffee pot? And he said, you know, I was kind of thinking the same thing. And it's like, to think about that now, like, there's no way we would have ever made that decision 2 or 3 years ago. Even though we were drowning in debt, we just felt like that would have been a necessity. And there's no way we could have told ourselves no.
They weren't just saying no to a $150 Keurig machine.
When you buy the K-Cups, that's more expensive than just buying regular old coffee. So cumulatively, we thought like, oh, that might be an expense we could do without. But like I said, we never would have even considered that before. It was just a real big attitude shift.
So now they're cutting down on the cost of their coffee. Then there's food.
Dining out was a big one for us because with my husband's disability and he's stuck in the house all day, for us, that was a lot of just like entertainment. And we would go out to eat all the time and not really think about it. And we knew that we were spending more than we wanted to, but like I said, we didn't have the living, breathing budget that we have with YNAB now. So it was just kind of in the back of our minds, like, yeah, we probably don't have enough, but we'll figure it out. And now we really do set a budget, and he and I sat down and talked about, what do you think is a reasonable amount? Do you want to go out to eat once a week, twice a week, whatever? And we kind of worked through that together. Whereas in the past, it was always me saying, well, we don't have the money for that.
Being on the same page with your spouse is one of the best things you can do to make your budget really work for you. If you don't have one scheduled, put one on the calendar every month, at least. It's amazing how much more effective you can be when you prioritize your dollars together. Tanya and her husband also cut back on a couple of their other bills.
We also started attacking some of our expenses and switched our cell phone plans, and we changed insurance companies. We had Verizon. We switched from them to AT&T prepaid, which was cheaper. And then just in the past month or so, we switched over to Red Pocket. A coworker of mine suggested it, and it was like a special deal that you bought the SIM card through eBay, and you have to pay for the whole year in advance, but it worked out to only being $20 a month. Prior, we were paying easily $150 to $200 a month total, just for the two of us, and now we're paying $40 a month, essentially. And that's something that we never would have done before YNAB, because honestly, we didn't trust ourselves to save the money for the next year. We know, okay, in a year from now, we're going to have that money again. We wouldn't have had it. But now with YNAB, I'm like, okay, so the money we're saving, we're just setting aside for a true expense. And in 12 months, we'll do it again.
Even though they've tightened things up, Tanya and her husband still make room in the budget to enjoy eating out. But now, instead of spending $300 plus per month,
we've been between $100 and $200 a month. When we get to the point where we think, okay, going out to eat means we're stealing from our debt snowball, then it's no, we're going to eat peanut butter and jelly if we have to. We're not doing that.
PB&J tastes pretty good when your debt's going down, and that $100 to $200 makes it feel doable.
We kind of felt like some people maybe think that we shouldn't be eating out at all when we have debt, but we know that we wouldn't stick to it. If we had to be completely strict for 3 years straight, there's no way we could stick to it.
And their strategy is working.
We've paid off almost $31,000 in the past 12 months.
$31,000 in 12 months. How did they do it?
We did have, one tax return, and then I do get a bonus at work, but the majority of it was not, we're not talking huge amounts of money, a couple thousand here and there. The biggest part, honestly, has been realistic budgeting, sticking to our budget, cutting expenses, making those hard choices about, no, we don't need cable, and no, we don't need the most expensive car insurance just because we've had it for 15 years. Once we got a handle on our money with YNAB and really wanted to get serious about the debt, I started questioning everything. Why are we paying so much for this? And could I get an extra $20 out of this bill or that bill? And in the past, I would have thought, oh, it's $20. It's no big deal. But when you have the numbers in front of you and you can see, oh, well, 10 from this bill, 20 from this bill, 10 from this bill, before you know it, you have a few $100s that you can use towards just attacking the debt. And it's been crazy.
Their plan is, within 3 years, to be completely debt-free.
It is. We want to move into a different school district before my son starts school. So that's been our big push of as much as we can get paid off before he has to start school, then we can move, and that'll be our last house, hopefully. And then we'll do it a little bit smarter and not get ourselves back in the hole that we have been in for so long.
If you feel trapped by your debt, Tanya says,
well, absolutely don't give up. And you have to give YNAB the time. In the beginning, it does take some time and really some commitment on your part to learn the system and really commit to doing it the way you should. And it will pay off. When we first started, I remember thinking, oh, I have to get all my accounts set up in YNAB, and I got to get a handle on all my balances. And I blocked off maybe a couple hours one Saturday morning, and it was just the best thing I could have done. It made such a difference and opened our eyes to how we were spending. It improved communication between me and my husband. He enters transactions on the go. So do I. It's just so so worth it. Just keep at it, take the classes, reach out to customer support, because I did in the beginning. I think literally the first day I signed up, I emailed customer support, and they were amazing. I mean, the people there are so nice and so helpful. They don't make you feel like you're an idiot, and they don't give you a canned cookie cutter response. They actually talk to you and figure out your issue. I just can't say enough about what YNAB has done for us. And if people are willing to put in the time to learn it up front, once you learn it, there's no looking back.